Welcome, everyone, to the Know Your Game podcast. I'm James Hargrove, Communication Director for US Indoor, and today our special guest is Angel Horowitz. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Client Operations Manager for DaySmart Recreation, long-standing partner with US Indoor. Angel, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
As are we. And today, as everyone can see in the description, we're going to be talking about leveraging technology, specifically software, and how it can improve your business or how you run and operate your indoor sports facility. So to kick things off, Angel, let's go ahead and roll out the carpet for you for introductions. Tell us who you are, how'd you get there, and a little bit about DaySmart, of course.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So I'm Angel Horowitz, as James said, Client Operations Manager at DaySmart Recreation. I actually started on the other side of the fence. So I started my career within a sports facility in Virginia Beach. I started as an intern and worked my way up to sport director, assistant general manager. So very familiar with all of the things, operations, how it kind of all works, and honestly, the chaos, as we all know, that ensues. And then from there, I went and worked for the MWR, so recreation with the Navy. I did more of the marketing and events side, and then I moved over to DaySmart Recreation, which was Dash platform at the time. For some of you that are a little bit older with the softwares and know that name, I started off as a trainer, and then I moved over to client success, and now I do client operations. And I actually do client operations not only with DaySmart Recreation, but with our other DaySmart products as well, because we do service like pet clients and vet clients and tattoos and appointment booking, things like that. So my current role, which is why I'm so interested in this topic, is actually looking at streamlining processes, how we can use technology to take off some of the admin lift from our staff, and just making sure we're being as efficient as possible to run our business the right way. So that would be where this topic kind of came from.
Yeah, and it's a big topic. I mean, once you mention the word technology and or software, I mean, it's a can of worms. It's a Pandora's box of just opportunities mostly, but for a lot of people, there's a lot of fear that goes with technology, especially if you're of the older crowd, who are adverse to change or adverse to anything technical. So the moment you mention software technology or that C word change, people get a little tense. And I'm sure you've encountered a lot of that in your space as well. So I guess to kind of kick off this topic, what would you say to people who are, let's say, not risk adverse, but change adverse when it comes to softwares and technology?
I would say at the end of the day, technology is only going to make you more efficient as long as you do your due diligence in figuring out what the problem is you're trying to solve and what different technologies can do to help solve those problems. And if we're being honest, you can always switch back if you need to. So there's really no harm in trying something out, seeing if it works, testing it, and then moving forward or not moving forward. As mentioned earlier, it can be very chaotic in sports facilities. We're all very aware of that. Everybody's running in a million directions, having their hands in a bunch of different pots. So it's always nice to figure out, even if it's something so small, that can just save you a little bit of time or your staff a little bit of time. That way you can take that energy and put it back into your customers. Because at the end of the day, like that's what we're here for, is making sure our customers are happy and the facility is operating the way we need to. So I would just say, like, there's no harm in doing research and talking to different facilities and different people to just figure out what are the different tools out there, what are the costs with them, and what problems can they solve? And then
Let's
you can
start from
make
the
an
top in
educated
terms
decision from
of
there.
saving money or time or both. Uh, How how and what could we potentially use to achieve those uh, savings in both time and money?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the biggest one is definitely your registration and scheduling software. let's just be honest, that's the heart of most of our businesses, whether you're doing it by paper and hand and a bunch of different ways, or you're using a software. That would be the one I see the most of. One, it is a big investment when you're talking about something that's going to directly affect your customers as well as your staff. But it's an investment that's definitely worth making. And, for us, Stay Smart Recreation, we are one of those softwares, but there are other softwares as well. So again, it comes down to doing your due diligence to make sure whatever problem you're trying to solve, the software will do it for you. And you will never find a software that's perfect and that is going to do every single thing that you want. So you really want to make sure that you are looking at what can be automated and how you can use that to either cut down staff time or just make the registration process easier for your customers. And so some things when I'm talking to people to look at is making sure you have a scheduler that can be a little bit more automated so you're not having to schedule leagues by hand, for instance. Like, yes, even people who have been doing it for years can do it fairly quickly, but a software is almost 90% of the time going to be able to do it quicker for you. Same thing with registrations. Like, you would most likely want your customers to be able to register online, have all the information, pay, it be a very seamless process. Communication is a big one. There are some softwares that can or cannot communicate with customers. And so you want to make sure that you're able to send out mass emails. There should be some, game reminders or whatever you're kind of looking for to where your staff doesn't necessarily have to remember to do every single step of the process. Some of that can be automated. Same thing with like opening up a league registration, for instance, or camps or classes, whatever it might be. There should be softwares out there that can automate that. So you can build your season and then say, okay, I want this to open on this date. Because again, there's just a lot going on. And before you know it, that date comes and goes. And you're like, oh man, I should have opened this a week ago. And now, we've lost some time basically. So it's just really important to figure out, again, what are the problems you're trying to solve? What is the order in which what's most important versus things that are nice to haves, and just do your research. Talk to different facilities and see what they're using. Make sure you get a good demo so that you can ask questions and test things out. But really, a lot of that is about automation and making sure you have a reliable software that can collect payments, that you can cut down admin work. And so, just making it a very streamlined process across the board. So those are some of the things I wanted to highlight.
Sure. And I know you can't speak on behalf of all the softwares that exist and platforms that exist out there, but when it comes to choosing the correct software for your facility, are most of them just kind of off the shelf product, or do a lot of them offer various degrees of customization? And of course, with Daysmart Recreation, how does that all apply to what you guys offer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually gone through 2 software changes myself when I worked within the facility. So these are also some things that I've experienced when we were looking for software. But yeah, I mean, depending on your facility's operations, some will need it more customizable than others. So that's definitely something that you want to look into. At the end of the day, if we're being realistic, each software was built for something very specific. So whether it was Parks and Rec, whether it was indoor sports facilities, ice, everything was built for something specific. And then over the years, all of our software companies have just adapted to the market and made sure we can kind of cross work with different types of facilities. So a lot of them are very customizable. It just kind of depends on what level that you need it to be. So that's a really good question of like, again, when you make that list, make sure that's on there of what you do need to be customizable, what's okay with just kind of the standard packaging, because it does vary from software to software.
Sure. And I know this is also probably part of your initial consultation with the client or a potential client. You just kind of sit down with them, let them tell you what they think they need or want, and then you kind of just go through it and either thumbs up it, thumbs down it, or offer some other suggestions on directions that they could potentially go or should go in terms of
Yeah,
what they need and their goals, right?
absolutely. At the end of the day, this is probably why I'm a terrible salesperson, but I'm never going to try to sell you something that just doesn't make sense for you. And that's how most software companies should be. Like,
Yeah.
You want to give something to somebody that actually can use it and need it, because at the end of the day, like, word of mouth is huge, and you want to make sure you're not selling something to a customer that's going to be unhappy. Like, that's just not the goal of hopefully any software company. So that stuff is really important, and understanding what the customer actually needs, what the software can and can't do, if there are any workarounds that like kind of get you there and it's enough, depending on, how high of a priority that item is on the facilities list. So yeah, you want to make sure you're working with software companies that are asking a lot of questions and making sure they understand your business, because it has to be both sided to have a good understanding of what each other needs to make this partnership work.
Sure. And when it comes to the ability of these software or these platforms, is it always or most of the time or always the case that you need one software can solve most solutions? Are they that comprehensive, or is it a matter of piecing together multiple softwares to achieve, let's say, a goal of a typical indoor sports facility?
I would definitely say it varies on the complexity of the or of the facility. So some softwares, like, for example, marketing, for instance, they may have some marketing capabilities, but it might not have everything that you're looking for. So, for example, they may have it where you can do mass email communication, but it can't be scheduled out. So you may still need your registration software along with something like MailChimp or another software along those lines that can kind of bridge that gap. So that's one example. Some things too, like, I know tournaments and club teams. That's something that's a very niche market. And so some facilities may need two softwares depending on the capabilities and how complex they're getting, with, let's just say, communicating within the team. Like, you want to have a communication app that's part of the registration process and the team. So some of your registration softwares may or may not do that. So you might need a tournament app on top of your registration. So that's just some examples. It really just depends on the facility's operations and how complex each of the softwares are, because some can do some of those things and some can't.
Sure. And in terms of compatibility, in my experience, I found that most software platforms, regardless of what they do, they are often compatible with one another. Is that a major issue to consider when stacking softwares to achieve certain things? Or are most softwares compatible with each other nowadays?
It kind of just depends. A lot of it depends on API requirements and how that works with both your registration software as well as the softwares you're trying to kind of integrate with.
Mm.
So there is a lot of flexibility, but it also depends on the facility's operations and who they have on their team. Some people might not even know what API means. So there's kind of a lot of factors there that just ties into making sure that your systems can talk, and if it can't talk, what are kind of the workarounds that you can talk through? Are there other options? So it's really being open-minded when you're looking at certain things and evaluating just how well they do or do not work together, and if you even need some of those other ones. I know we've had times where someone's coming from like 5 different softwares and we're like, hey, we can condense you down to two, or one. So
Right.
that's really important too, because that goes back to your question of saving money, saving time, saving frustrations. All of that plays a part. Yeah, and it ties into something you touched upon earlier, just even with the turnover side of things. It's much easier to train a new staff on one or two softwares versus having 5 different things that you're trying to get them acclimated to. And that turnaround is just not going to be as quick. So that's something to consider as well.
Sure. And in that same vein, when it comes to, let's say, training or onboarding a new client with DaySmart Recreation, now how long is that process, or how long is that runway from the time they say, okay, let's do it, until the time that they're, we'll call it, proficient in using that software? And I know it depends on who you're talking to, but on
Yeah.
average, about how long would it take for someone to adopt a new softwares and get it off the ground and running?
I was going to say it definitely varies on a couple of different things. One, and probably the most important, is who from the facility is going to be implementing the software, because tech savvy people versus a little not as tech savvy people, it definitely takes a little bit more time to get people up and running. And especially if you have one person that's building everything out versus having like all of the managers learning their sections as you're going through implementation, that's a very big deal. And I would say, like, if someone is looking for software, please plan on other people outside of one person being part of that process, because sometimes we try to tell people that, and then the ones that do just have one person, they tend to struggle a little bit more than the people that bring in their team and actually have them acclimated. So that plays a big factor in it. It also plays a factor in how many parts of the system you need, because there's some people that might only need it for leagues and the calendar and cash register, versus there's people that might need it for online booking, internal bookings, quick ticketing. Like, there's a whole bunch of different features. So it can be anywhere from 7 hours to 20 hours, but it also, again, depends on, like, if you're a multi-location facility, if you know what I mean. Like, there are a lot of factors, and that's going to be probably for any software you work with.
Sure.
You're going to be thinking about those same types of things. But I know for our software, and I'm sure other softwares are kind of doing the same thing, like we're creating more e-learning content, we're creating more in-app like product tour type things, so that it's just a little bit easier for people to implement. Because, back to your question earlier about customization is phenomenal, but when you have so many things that you can customize, it just makes things a little bit more complicated with, having to learn the system and what to toggle on, off, things like that. So that's something to consider also, is just the system is going to be a little bit more complicated depending on all of the bells and whistles you kind of need, and how different your operations are, because every facility operates so differently in terms of how they do their registration. Like, one might want custom forms where you're asking questions to customers, and another one doesn't, but they have passes and memberships that they're selling, and discounts that do this for this program and this program. And so it's good to have that flexibility, but it does take time to learn how to correctly build that stuff out.
Right. And this year, I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and plug our conference a little bit.
Absolutely.
As everyone knows, our conference is just around the corner. This year we'll be in St. Pete, nice sunny location, of course. Angel will be there,
Yes.
a Day Smart representing. So we want people to come by and visit you guys, visit your booths. And if someone does approach you for the first time, what is one of the, I guess, first things you say to kind of kick off that conversation? I know you see people approach you and they're interested, but they might not even know the right question to ask you. They're just kind of wandering up to you with those big glossy eyes and like, So like, how would you, I guess, approach someone in that scenario, or engage with them?
Yeah, and I'm not a salesperson, so salespeople might do it a little bit differently. But again, I am very big about, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, what are you lacking right now that even made you come over here? Because at the end of the day, like, if everything was perfect in your world, you probably wouldn't even approach the booth because you wouldn't need to. So, is it something that's a small, just one thing that doesn't work with your current software that just, for whatever reason, makes you want to switch? Or are you not on a software and you're just trying to not have to use Google Calendar and Excel spreadsheets and all of the different things? So I think that really is the biggest thing that you just have to start with, because until I learn about what your needs are, I could sell you on something that you don't even need at all. Like, if I'm telling you about online booking and it's great, and you're like, I don't even have online rentals, then what was the point of me even talking to you about that? So I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is really just understanding the facility's needs, and what problem they're trying to solve.
In the HR space, what would you recommend?
QuickBooks still seems to be the number one out there that most people use. There's definitely some other ones, especially Parks and Rec. They typically have a longer list of things that they're using. But again, QuickBooks seems to be a good one that people just, at least everyone I've trained in the past, and most people we've talked to, they kind of go toward. There are definitely other ones, but it's having that type of software just seems to keep everything together and just allows for better reporting. And if you guys get audited and things like that, it's just easy to like have all the information you kind of need in one place. And one thing to think about with your softwares too is some of them should be able to like export the reporting that you need to be able to import into a financial software. Or if it can't do that, it's at least easily digestible for you to pull the report and then enter in the information manually. So just something to consider.
Sure. And to kind of go back a step to one of our our first topic, earlier topics, is when it comes to registration scheduling, what are maybe one or two must-have features should a software have in regards to scheduling, registration, and the like?
Being able to do it. So like there, scheduling it can be very complicated. And so you're able to take at least a little bit of that manual work and just use a software to schedule the games onto the schedule, that alone is going to take a lot of time off your plate. So scheduling, and then just being able to easily manipulate it once you've created the schedule, because at the end of the day, like if it snows and you have to close the facility for a day, you're going to have to move all those games. So just being able to have the ability to pivot pretty easily if needed would be important too. I would say those would be the top two for me.
Sure. And in regards to analytics, what would you say is some of the best in slot out there for analytics?
Oh, there's a lot, but definitely like Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, anything kind of in that Google family, and then linking with like Facebook Pixels and some of that marketing type information is important. One, because it's free, so there's not really reason not to use it. But two, that's going to help you figure out where you should be kind of spending your time on marketing your facility, your programs, all that good stuff. So, living in the data is not always the fanciest thing in the world. And sometimes you're a little short staffed in the marketing aspect to be able to look at some of this. But it is important to make sure, especially if you're not hitting your numbers or you're trying to learn more about your clientele, like the information there is going to be extremely helpful to, make smart marketing decisions.
Sure. And I guess as a final talking point, and one thing that I'm quite interested in personally is AI. The emergence of AI, when I say emergent, the emerging improvements of AI and how exponentially it seems to be growing. We're hearing about it almost daily in different aspects. How is AI affecting the software industry? Is it a good, neutral, bad thing? And should more people be paying attention to it?
Yeah, I mean, it is very powerful. It's a little bit scary, to be honest, to think of where it can go. But I mean, software companies everywhere, not just in the recreation space, are figuring out different ways that they can leverage it. So even, for example, there are support softwares for like chatting and tickets and things like that that are using AI to be able to help an agent respond to customers. Like if they can't find the information easily, or if they want it to be structured in a different format, like the capability is insane. One of the things I will say is like ChatGPT has been pretty easy to leverage. It's free. So some interesting ways that we've kind of told people like, hey, I've used this is, especially if you have new staff, especially younger staff in sports facilities that may not have had training in like how to reply to customers, how to de-escalate certain situations, things like that. You can have where you've typed out an email to a customer and you're not quite sure how to word it. Put it in ChatGPT and say, hey, can you make this sound more professional, or can you make this sound however kind of you need to, and it'll spit it back out for you, and then you can send it to your customers. Like I've done that before where it's like, this sounds a little bit not so professional, like can we go ahead and clean this up? So that's like just a quick example of like leverage the technology that we have so that you can make sure you're being as efficient as possible. Especially if, like, I know marketing is a huge one where people may or may not have a marketing team. If you don't, make sure you're leveraging tools that will make things easier, because you can have it, where it's helping you with descriptions, if you're doing social posts, or even if you're linking up with something like Canva, which is where you can create visuals that you may want to post on your website or on your socials. Like, all of those things are now starting to tie together and make it really easy that even if you don't have a marketing team, you can make it look like you have a marketing team and make sure you're kind of keeping up with the visuals of what you'd like your facility to represent.
Awesome. Well, Angel, we're approaching the end of this podcast, and as we do, how can people reach you between now and the conference for those who are not coming to the conference? Who would be the main POC over at DaySmart Recreation for those who are interested in everything that they've heard in this podcast? Should they contact you, or is there someone else?
Yeah, it really just depends. If you're looking for more of a sales demo, that would definitely be our sales team. So that's just, I believe, recsales@daysmart.com. And I can send that over to you as well for you to add in there. If you're looking for more of conference type stuff, we will be at the conference, as you mentioned. We're rolling kind of deep. I think we'll have 7 to 10 people coming with us. And so we'll be reaching out and scheduling meetings with our current customers. We'll be doing some strategy sessions, some training sessions. Our sales team, or 1 or 2 people from sales, will be there. So we'll definitely be at the booth. So definitely come say hi to us. We love talking with customers. This is actually our favorite conference of the year. So we are all so excited. But yeah, if you have questions, you can also reach out to me, and then I can distribute as needed as well. So we'll make sure we get my information in front of y'all too.
Angel, thanks once again for doing this. We'll make sure to put all that information on the screen so you guys can see it, how to contact, where to go, and of course, download the recording of this podcast. With that, Angel, thanks for being here. Can't wait to see you at our conference. Till then, everyone, take care.
Thanks, James.